Wonder Woman burst into the DC universe in 2016 in the movie Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. The movie, not such a good movie. It wasn't very well received, but you know what the one bright spot in the entire movie was? The Wonder Woman character. Played by Gal Gadot, the character would go on to headline her own movie, which most consider, those that actually have taste in movies, consider to be the best movie to date in the DCU. She would reprise her role in the DC movie Justice League. And well, she has a second movie coming out in 2020, just so you know, they messed me up. Originally, that movie was scheduled to release June 1st, 2019, the week after this sermon series finishes. Nice little follow-up there, but that's okay. They moved it, but we're okay with that. She's going to have her own movie again in 2020. And you know what? This new version of Wonder Woman, she was quite different from the 70s TV show. Gone is the tight bathing suit costume, and it was replaced by a more warrior-like look. The accessories that we came to know and love, the golden lasso and the bullet deflecting bracelets, the tiara, they were all there, but now they were no longer the source of her power. They were simply accessories that went with the costume. This version of Wonder Woman was designed to stand side by side with the more powerful DCU heroes such as Batman and Superman, and even steal the show from them. So today we're going to continue our trek through Wonder Women of the Bible. We're specifically looking through Old Testament Wonder Women, and I hope this is giving you an understanding that God's plan wasn't just a man thing. Women played a significant role in God's purpose and plan, and I'm not talking just as the baby-making machine. Nor was she designed to be just the eye candy sidekick. Woman was designed to be a full partner in the redemption plan. Now, we have a saying in our culture, and I don't know that it's really our saying. It's a saying that really nobody knows the origin of it. Behind every great man is a great woman. Some give it as early as 1900s, the early 1900s when this showed up. The first time it was actually printed in a newspaper was in Texas in 1946. But people used the saying to give recognition to the women in men's lives. I mean, men take the credit, and of course, behind every great man, somebody had to do all of the hard work, and somebody had to do all the heavy lifting. Somebody had to give birth to them, right? That they didn't get here on their own. And so behind every great man, there is a great woman. And the thing is not today. We're going to look at a character that didn't stand behind a man. Her name was Deborah. I like that name. I think that's a good name. In case those who don't know, that's my wife's name. It's important that you know what she was not before we tell you who she is. Because what she was not was important. The Bible never records, I'm missing an S there, records Deborah having any children whatsoever. She wasn't a mom as we knew. She was not. There was a good chance Deborah was not what we would call a biological mother. She never gave birth. Now this is important because last week we celebrated Mother's Day. And you know, we have lots of ladies that maybe have never actually given birth. And so they don't consider themselves a mother. Well, you do understand that you don't have to actually have given birth to be a mother. There are lots of different, I told you, types and styles of mothers, and I think God leaves some women without ever having given birth just so they can use those maternal instincts to reach into other people's lives and be a mother to many instead of just a mother to a few. And so that's important for us to remember because this distinction breaks the mold of how we usually view women in the Bible. Think about it. How do we view somebody like Eve? Well, we view her with Adam and the fact that she gave birth to everybody. How do we usually think about Hagar? We think of Ishmael. How do we usually think of Sarah? Well, we think of Isaac. We usually view women. How do we even know who Jochebed is? Her kids. Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. So we usually think of women in the Bible by who their kids are. But not this girl. She does have a title. Many commentaries consider her a mother to Israel. Now, this does not mean that she cooked their meals for them. This does not mean that she changed their diapers. This does not mean that she was there to patch their boo-boos. She was a mother to a nation in some of the very dark times. You see, Deborah was not a mother, but she was a wife. Now, before you get too caught up in that, she did have a husband, but his name is Lapidoth. And before you say, well, let's go find out who Lapidoth is, if you go and Google his name, you know what you'll find out? He was the husband of Deborah. We have no idea. So even the husband that she married doesn't have any significance to who Jewish history is. He's just a guy. See, because Deborah was a character all into her own. She was her own person, and she was a woman living in a man's world. Now, before you think that's a sexist comment, give me just a moment. Judges chapter 4, verse 4 reads, Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. So what was that time? Well, Deborah was one of 12 judges of Israel. Now, if you're not familiar with who the 12 judges of Israel are, well, these were the individuals that guided the nation of Israel at the end of Joshua. You remember Joshua? You know, Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, marched around the wall, fell down, captured the land. Okay, well, from there until King Saul, and we usually know who King Saul is. He's the first king of Israel. He's the one that they kind of picked out because he looked right. He looked the part. And so between Joshua and Samuel, between Joshua and Saul, there was no true government for Israel because he was supposed to be their king, God. And so what would happen is Israel had judges because while they were trying to find God, trying to follow God, they were in messy times. Israel constantly turned from God. As you read the book of Judges, what happens is they come in and they start following other gods and going other ways and leaving God behind. And then eventually what happens is somebody comes in and takes over the land or puts them into slavery or begins to battle with them. And then when they're all in a mess, they remember, oh yeah, we've got God. And they pull God out and they start praying to God. And God raises up one of these judges that comes in to lead them, not so much in a governmental rule, lead them on a path back to a relationship with God. And the sad thing is, you would think this should just be a one-chapter story, but there were 12 of these people. There were 12 of them, and Deborah was the only female member of the group. The other 11 were all guys. So she literally was the woman living in a man's world because she was the only female that ever got this title of judge. And trust me, I have resisted the idea of doing the whole sermon series called Justice League, because here's our Wonder Woman of this particular group. She's the only girl that God put in this role. And the other thing that we find from Judges chapter 4 is she's a prophet. So not only is she a judge, she's a prophet. Now, we intersected Miriam last week. Remember, that was one of Jochebed's only female child. And she too was a prophet. She was the first prophet of Israel, the only one that we got recorded that she was a true prophet of Israel. And so now take a look. Now we have another prophet that is a female. So this is an important distinction because if you think females had no voice in the Bible, then you need to go reading a little bit. God gave them messages all the time, things that they were supposed to share with the world. You see, the idea of prophet, this title of prophet meant that she was in direct communication with God. God had given her something very special and very specific that she didn't give to a guy. He did not give it to a guy. He only gave it to Deborah because she was the prophet. She was providing spiritual guidance for a nation. Now this shouldn't surprise us because most of the time who provides the spiritual guidance for the household? It's mom. Let's just be honest with it. Usually it's mom. In a perfect world, it's mom and dad working together, but you see we're much more likely to have females coming to church without their husbands than husbands coming to church without their wives. It just doesn't work that way for some reason. And so, but this girl, she was providing the spiritual guidance for an entire nation. Everybody came to her. You wanted something from God? You wanted to talk to God? Deborah, where's your girl? Again, this is a title that we usually associate with men in the Bible. mentioned this last week. We usually think of, when I think prophet, I think Daniel and Isaiah and Zechariah and Malachi. I think of Jeremiah. All of these great big books of the Bible that they gave these wonderful messages. And Deborah doesn't have her own book, but she definitely had her own ministry. Because not only was she a prophet, she was a leader. Let that sink in for a second. She was a leader. She was not just a spiritual advisor. She was a leader. She was not part of a leadership team. She was the leader. She was the one God put in place during this time in the nation of Israel to be the focal point as far as God's message and God's power and as far as what God has to say. It was not a guy. It was a girl. It was a woman. And she led the nation of Israel. And just so you know, she ruled. Verse 5 tells us she held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. And the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. So not only was she just a judge, she literally was a judge. She literally was deciding disputes. If you had some kind of a problem, a property dispute or a family dispute or some kind of other thing going on in your life, and you needed the government to sort it out for you, you were going to sue the person, they were going to have their dispute settled, then you notice the first thing is she wasn't traveling. You wanted to see Deborah? You met on her grounds. As a matter of fact, she even had her own tree. They call it the Palm of Bethel. I think it was probably more like a little oasis, a place where you came to her and you laid your case out before. And when it says she decided, there were no court of appeals. Okay? Whatever she said, that was now the law. Whatever she decided, that was the conclusion. Whatever she said goes, that's what you did. This is who this is. She was actually ruling the nation. Somebody once asked me, would I vote for a female president? I'm like, you know what? They might do a better job than most of the guys did. Would I? Absolutely. Because you know what? God doesn't have a problem with women in leadership. He doesn't. Because if he did, then she wouldn't be here. God doesn't have a problem with women taking a role where they are actually representing God. He doesn't have that problem. Somehow we've gotten this idea, we've taken that scripture that, well, women are supposed to be silent and not say anything. That isn't what God's saying. I mean, just look at her. Here she is. Just so you know, the battle image of the new Wonder Woman in 2016 kind of fits this girl. Because you know what? She went into battle. Verse 10 says, then Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali. I didn't name these people. And then 10,000 men went up under his command. And Deborah also went with him. So it's not like she was at home making decisions and the guys did all the fighting. You get when the time for war came, Deborah went with the army. And she's not going to be the nurse. She's not going to be the person that takes care of the cooking. She's not running the mess hall. Deborah is going into battle with a purpose. And you know what? While Barak got all the guys together, guess who was leading that army? It was Deborah. You see, verse 14 tells us that she inspired the armies of Israel. Then Deborah said to Barak, now notice the pecking order here. Deborah said to Barak, not Barak to Deborah. Who's giving the orders? Deborah. This is her battle. This is her fight. This is her war. This is her responsibility. Then Deborah said to Barak, go. This is the day the Lord has given Caesarea into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you? And she's reminding the guys about who God is. So Barak went down to Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. So here they are in the thick of the battles, and the guys win the war, and they're ready to stop and celebrate. And Deborah's like, no, we're not done yet. You see the ones retreating? Go get them. Finish the battle. Don't stop where you are. Yeah, we won the hill. Who cares about the hill? We want to win the war. And so she looks at this man that had recruited 10,000 soldiers, and she said, what are you standing here for? Get moving. Go. Go finish the battle you started. You get the image that She probably had a loud voice. Could you imagine what it was like? See, she wasn't with anybody. Batman and Superman looked at Wonder Woman like, well, was she with you? She wasn't with anybody. Who was she with? She was with herself. Deborah understood what it meant to be a leader, to be an inspiration, to hear God's voice and share God's voice. And ironically, she gets lost in her own story. She does. I mean, later on, we had this guy come along and he wrote a book called Hebrews. And in Hebrews, he wrote a section that I nicknamed the Hall of Faith. And in it, he hung all these pictures with people of great faith in it. And he listed people like Moses and Abraham, and he listed David, and he listed all of these people that had such tremendous faith from the Old Testament. And he even starts listing the judges, the Council of 12, the people that came through and led. And, well, he lists Barak, not Deborah. This is what Hebrews chapter 11, verses 32 through 33 says. And what more shall I say? I do not have time to tell you about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised. There's a name missing, isn't it? I mean, Judges chapter 4 and 5 was not the story of Barak, it was the story of Deborah. As a matter of fact, Barak wasn't even willing to go at the beginning. He told Deborah, I'm not going unless you go with me. I'm not going to go lead this army. You're going to have to come and lead it with me. We're going to have to be co-conspirators in this idea. Barak wasn't willing to go, but when we hang the pictures, we hang his picture, not hers. Even the end of the story, you would think she would at least get to kill the nemesis, right? I mean, she's leading the enemy, and she's out there, and so she should be the one that gets to put him to death. No, she got lost in her story there because this woman named Jael, who was the wife of Israel's enemy, actually ended up killing the enemy by putting a stake through him. Okay, literally. You think the Bible's boring, go read this book. You think Hollywood came up with gruesome? Go read the book of Judges. They got nothing on the explosions because you know what? This was a gruesome book, and so this wife just literally killed her husband, and she's the one that gets credit for vanquishing the army that was there. So Deborah gets lost in her own story. She doesn't even get her credit in the role. I mean, that's just terrible, isn't it? And maybe that begins to make you wonder, well, why would you pick this kind of a person to do a sermon on? I mean, if she can't even be the star of her own movie, then what good is she, right? If she can't even be the headliner, obviously she must be some kind of secondary character out there. She can't have that much to her. I mean, after all, who is she? She just doesn't even get a mention in the Hall of Faith with all the other judges. So why would you do this? And here's the amazing thing. Start thinking about those judges for a minute. You know some of those names. Hebrews mentions some of those names. Unlike Samson, she was given no superpowers. We know Samson, right? He's the guy with the great big long hair that had to put his hair into braids because it was so long. We studied him last year when we did Not Another Hero. We know that he had super strength, and from the moment he was born, God blessed him, and he was able to kill people with a jawbone, and he was able to pull a temple down on top of people. He had all of this strength that God gave him, and he wasted it. You read no superpowers for Deborah. She's not given anything miraculous to work with here. Unlike Gideon, she did not get some miracle tactic. We know Gideon. He's the coward that was down there trying to hide himself in a hole just so he wouldn't get his bread stolen, so he can get his lunch money taken from him. And there he is, and the angel of the Lord comes and tells him, I want you to go to battle. He said, not me. You got the wrong address. You must be down the road a little bit because I don't do that kind of stuff. And so the angel finally convinces him to go, and he goes out and he recruits all these people, and God says, too many people, send some of them home. So he sends some of them home, and then God said, you still got too many people. Send some more home. So he sent some more home. And then he said, you know what? You don't even need any swords for this battle. All you need is a torch and some pots. I want you to put the pots over top. I want you to light the torches, put the pots over to hide the light, and then when the signal is given, everybody break the pots and then just watch the chaos. And God took care of the battle for him, and Gideon didn't even have to lift a finger except for to light some torches. Deborah didn't get any of that. She actually had to go into battle. She had to pick up a sword. She had to do some work. God didn't give her anything to work with except for herself. Unlike Samuel, we're not told of some whisper in the night calling for her. We know the story of Samuel, right? Samuel was the little boy that Hannah prayed for, and Hannah took him back to the temple. And then Eli was the priest, but God had decided to leave Eli because of the way he had raised his sons and because his sons weren't honoring God. And so he decides, I'm going to choose Samuel as my new priest. And so in the middle of the night, God comes whispering for Samuel. Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel doesn't recognize the voice, and he goes and wakes Eli, and Eli gets all upset because you woke an old man from sleep. Who wants to do that? So he tells him to go back, and then he calls him again, Samuel, Samuel. Again, Samuel goes, and he wakes Eli, and Eli's like, what are you doing? Why do you keep waking? You hearing things? And then Eli realizes who's calling. And he looks at Samuel, and he says, the next time you hear the voice, just look at God and say, here I am. And you know what? That's what he did, and Samuel is legendary. Samuel is the prophet, the last judge of Israel. A man with great powers and great abilities who had the privilege of not only of anointing the first king, Saul, but also God's chosen king, David. That's not Deborah. She wasn't given any of that. She wasn't giving any of those things to go out and do the task that God gave her to do. And so I'm enthralled by what did he give her? You see, the only ability that made her special was her availability. That's the only thing unique about her. When you read her story and you read Judges chapter 4 and Judges chapter 5, the only thing that makes Deborah special was she was available for what God asked her to do. She was available to lead. Notice there were no other guys around that were willing to pick up the mantle. Who knows where they were? Maybe they were off fishing. I don't know what they were doing, but they left it up to her. And you know what? She didn't shy away from the task. She stepped into it and she said, you know what? I'll lead. I'll be available. She was available to hold court. I mean, every day she had to go out there to that palm tree and sit there and listen to people whine about what's wrong with their life. And ask them to please fix my life. You don't think that gets old? Mom's like, yeah, that's getting old. Yeah, that gets really old. Okay? She had to keep listening to all these cases, and every day she got up and she went. Probably not on the Sabbath. She probably took Sundays off. Well, Saturdays off. So not on the Sabbath, but every day. This was their mission that she had. She was available to fight. How easy would it have been for her that when the battle started, you know what? I called you, I've taught you, I've trained you. You go and fight. It's time for me to stay here because this isn't my fight. God told me I was supposed to go and find a guy to lead this thing, so why don't you just go by yourself? No. She finished the job she started because she was available to go and fight the battle that God had given her. She didn't shirk her responsibilities. She finished the job, and you know what? She was available to command. They had won the hill. The enemy was on retreat. How easy would it have been for her to say, let's go home and make a meal and just kind of celebrate? But she made herself available not to just win one battle, but to continue on and win the entire war. You think she's not important? See, because when I think of people like Samson, God never gave me super strength. It'd be cool, just for a little while, just for a couple of days, but I don't have any super strength, nor any other special abilities. I think of Gideon. God's never given me a plan. Most of the time I'm making things up as I go along, seriously. I don't have some kind of special God-designed plan where God said, here's the handbook on how to do this. I don't have that. I don't have some special whisper calling where God pulled me into a room and said, this is what you're supposed to do. I feel like I've been called in the ministry, but God did not wake me in the middle of the night going, Barry, wake up. I got a job for you. That's not the way this happened. See, all of those other people, all of those other judges, I can't relate to because I don't have what they have. But Deborah, I can relate to her because she had nothing except for her willingness to be available for God's plan. And you know what? That ties very nicely into a scripture that Jesus gave us in Luke chapter 10, verse 27. He, now this is Jesus speaking, answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. Now there's a key word in that scripture, and he keeps repeating it, and hopefully it jumps out. The key word is all. How much is all? 100%. 99% not good enough. Halfway, not done. God wants all. Have you ever thought about that? God is not satisfied with your good enough efforts. If God can't have everything, he would rather have nothing. Does that bother you? I mean, in Revelation, he says, I either want you hot or cold. If you're just lukewarm, you make me sick to my stomach. That's what he said to that church at Laodicea. God wants everything that you have or nothing. Jesus didn't say, well, if you love the Lord your God 50% of the time, that's good enough. You know what? If you think about God 75% of the time, that's good enough. If you serve God 99% of the time, that's good. That's not the quote, is it? That's not the verse. Now, this has a two-way connotation because all is not the only 100% in that verse. We're talking about this idea of available. And so let's take a look at this verse because it's important. First, he says, I want 100% of your heart. That's your emotions. That's the things that drive you. That's your feelings. That's that deep inside of you, what you usually call you. The inside of you. He wants all of that. He wants all of your soul. He wants all of your spiritual being. He wants all of those things that you're thinking about. He wants it all to focus on having that relationship with Him. He wants your spirit. He doesn't want to share the place with Him and whatever God you decide to pick with it. He wants all of your soul, all of your spirit. He wants all of your physical, your strength. This bag of flesh that we call skin and bones, this thing that we call life here on this planet, Jesus says He wants all of that. He's interested in the physical. He's interested in people that are physically willing to go out and serve Him. He's interested in people that will physically go out and minister to other people. He is interested in the physical. For us to think this is just a spiritual exercise where I come here on Sunday mornings and I get all filled up and I go home and I just kind of bask in the glow of being in God's presence. That's not all. Because Jesus says, I want your strength. I want your muscles, your back. And then He says, I want your mind. I want your brain. I want your thought. I want your plans. I want this. Now, if I add up my heart, my soul, my strength, my mind, how much of me is that? That's everything. So, Jesus basically in this verse says, for you to understand what it means to have a relationship with God, you have to be willing to give 100% of 100%. Can't hold anything back. I don't get to take my life and shove the things that I don't like on it and just hold a few cards full of paper. That's not loving God. I don't get to pick and choose what Jesus you take this one for you and one for me. Two for you, one for me. That's not the way it works. You see, Deborah was an amazing judge because she was 100% committed. You want to know why she probably had no kids? She had no time for them. Really. This was God being merciful to whoever her children would have been because you know what? She didn't take the time to have kids because she knew God had a bigger plan for her. And this is not saying she had kids wrong. We have two. Kids are precious. But you do understand, God wants 100% when you do have kids, and what He wants 100% of those kids. We don't take that command seriously. God blesses you with a child. God expects you to give 100% of the child back to Him to raise them in such a way that they will grow in a relationship with Him, so that when they go out, they will increase more. See, it's a 100% equation. It's really simple math. And it's not complicated math. anything less than 100%, God says, you know what? I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't use